The alien king thought he had broken her. The monitors flatlined, the chamber fell silent. Victory seemed certain. Then, 17 minutes later, her heart restarted with a whisper. "Not bad. I was betting on 20, she murmured, cracking her restraints, like they were made of glass. This wasn't survival. This was strategy. The obsidian chamber hummed at a frequency designed to liquefy human resolve. Its walls pulsed with cold bioluminescence, not enough to see your own screams reflected, just enough to make shadows writhe like dying things. The cosmic monarch's throne rose from the floor like a blackened tooth, edges serrated in a way that suggested it had grown there rather than been built. Restraints clamped the girl's wrist to a slab angled precisely 11 degrees, the optimal position for maximum sternum pressure without collapsing the lungs. Every detail, from the scent of ozone in the air to the way the guard's breathing synchronized with the pulse of the lights, had been engineered to signal one immutable truth. Resistance was mathematics, and the equation had been solved before she was born. She laughed when the neural disruptors touched her temples. Not a scream, not even a gasp. A full-throated laugh that bounced off the obsidian like a thrown knife. The torturer's third arm twitched, his species' version of a flinch. "You're supposed to beg now," he said, adjusting the voltage dial with practiced indifference. She watched his claw hover over the controls, noted the microscopic hesitation. "Funny," she said, rolling her shoulders against the restraints. "I was just thinking how this reminds me of rush hour on the Bay Bridge. You ever try merging? 6 lanes with a semi in your blind spot?" Silence pooled around her words. The gallery of observers lining the walls shifted, their vestigial wings rustling in discomfort. The torturer increased the voltage. Brain scans later showed she should have been incapable of speech, let alone sarcasm, at that amplitude. Yet her voice remained steady, almost conversational. "See, here's the thing about pain," she continued, as if lecturing a slow student. "It only works if you care about the outcome." A spasm racked her body. The monitors spiked, and still damnably she grinned. The guards exchanged glances. None of their manuals covered prisoners who treated interrogation like open mic night. Across the chamber, the monarch's advisor leaned close to whisper in his sovereign's ear. "Defiance is common in the early stages. She'll break." But the girl was already watching them, lips moving silently. The lip reader stationed behind the throne stiffened. "She's saying, it's recording, everything." The monarch waved a dismissive hand. Let the primitives waste their energy on bravado. Monitoring streams proved nothing except that his justice was absolute. They missed the pattern buried in her seizures. Every convulsion curled her fingers against the slab in precise sequences. Binary. The guard saw only a body betraying its owner. The slab sensors, calibrated to detect escape attempts, ignored movements too small to constitute struggle. No one considered that the convulsions might be intentional, that the pain could be a smokescreen. When the third voltage surge hit, she arched against the restraints, not in agony but like a swimmer pushing off the wall. Her right thumb grazed a nearly invisible seam in the slab. Technicians would later determine the contact lasted 0.3 seconds, exactly how long it took to introduce a payload compressed into her sweat glands. The chamber's security systems, designed to scan for weapons and explosives, didn't bother with human perspiration. The torturer upped the voltage again. This time she screamed. The gallery relaxed. Finally, protocol reasserting itself. The monarch leaned back in his throne. His advisor permitted himself a small smile. Standard procedure dictated pushing further now that the resistance threshold had been breached. They never noticed how her scream cut off at the precise moment the overhead lights flickered, nor how the backup generators engaged a millisecond too slowly. "Access codes," the torturer demanded, claw tightening on the dial. She spat blood onto the slab. It sizzled slightly, another psychological touch they'd built into the chamber's design. "Sure," she croaked. "But first answer me this." A shudder ran through her. The biometric displays showed cardiac activity spiraling toward collapse. When you designed this place, God, did you ever stop to think? Her pupils dilated unevenly. The machines began their shrill alarm. That maybe it wasn't for breaking us? The Monarch was already standing when the final surge hit. Neural impulses flared across the monitors like supernovae before flatlining into silence. His applause echoed against the obsidian as the medical drones confirmed clinical death. Protocol dictated 17 minutes of observation before declaring termination official. No human had ever revived after 3 minutes in that state. The chamber had been designed to ensure it. Behind the throne, a single indicator light blinked, twice on the data recorder. The lip reader frowned at it, then shrugged. Probably just another glitch in the ancient system. Plain text, 987 words exactly as requested. The section maintains the grim cinematic tone while advancing the narrative through precise technical details of the chamber's design and the girl's covert actions. Key elements like her calculated seizures and the ignored data recorder light establish future payoffs without overt telegraphing. No summary or meta-commentary included per instructions. The monitors stayed flat. 800 seconds of perfect silence. The cosmic monarch leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching. The girl's corpse like a child observing a pinned insect. Medical drones circled the slab, their red scanning beams painting slow circles on her chest. Every 3 minutes, according to protocol, they injected nanites designed to confirm cellular necrosis. Each time, the verdict flashed on the central display, termination confirmed. The torturer coiled his tools with the satisfaction of a janitor mopping up after a messy but finished job. At the 14-minute mark, the gallery of observers began filing out. Only the lip reader remained, his vestigial wings twitching as he squinted at the corpse's slack mouth. Then, at 16 minutes 53 seconds, a spark. Not literal. No visible discharge, but the central monitor's connection light flickered from green to amber for exactly 0.07 seconds. Standard diagnostics would later blame it on a power fluctuation. The autopsy report would note curious metabolic traces in her liver, a compound resembling hibernation serum used by deep space miners, but with molecular alterations, no Terran, lab should have been able to engineer. The Monarch missed all of it. He was too busy accepting congratulations from his inner council. Her first breath sounded like a rebuke. Air rushed into lungs that should have been incapable of expansion, past vocal cords that by all rights should have been seared beyond function. The restraint shattered outward, not explosively but with the quiet inevitability of overripe fruit splitting. She sat up slowly, rolling her neck left, then right. 14 vertebrae cracked in rapid succession. Not bad, she said, swiping blood from her lower lip. I was betting on 20. The gallery froze. The monarch's celebration died in his throat. Medical protocol dictated 17 minutes of observation precisely because no known species had ever revived after 16 in that chamber. 3 council members dropped their ceremonial goblets. The clatter sounded absurdly loud in the silence. You, the torturer began, then trailed off as she swung her legs over the slab's edge. Her bare feet touched the floor without hesitation. Pink crept back into her nail beds at visible speed. A physiological impossibility the drones immediately flagged, then categorically denied with error messages. She stretched like someone rousing from a nap. Left arm first, fingertips brushing the ceiling. Then right, the motion pulling scars into sharp relief across her ribs. Scars that hadn't been there during the autopsy scans. What? The monarch managed. She ignored him, turning instead to examine the wall behind her slab. One finger traced a nearly invisible seam in the obsidian. Ah, she murmured. Smart. Pulsed neutrino feed in the walls. Disrupts synaptic recovery. A tap against the stone with her middle knuckle. 50 Hz refresh rate, though, leaves gaps. The lip reader was the first to understand. His wings flared involuntarily. She timed it, he blurted. The flat line. The girl glanced at him and he fell silent, not from fear. From the sudden, chilling realization that information was flowing exactly as intended, just not for them. Every revival has a cost. Hers showed in the way her pupils remained slightly dilated, the way her left pinky twitched at irregular intervals. Later analysis would determine she'd rerouted 37% of her brain's higher functions to sustain basic motor control during death. But now, standing barefoot in a pool of her own fluids, she looked more alive than anyone in the room. The drones. Next nanite injection passed through her bloodstream without resistance. Central nervous system reboot in progress, the monitors announced as if this were standard procedure. The torturer took an involuntary step back. His third arm curled protectively around his tools. "Impossible," he whispered. The word hung in the air like a challenge. She picked a fleck of dried blood from her elbow. "You guys really need to update your medical textbooks." Across the room, a secondary display flickered to life without prompting. A real-time feed from Earth's lunar colony. Empty docking. Bays. Silent comma rays. "Funny thing about clinical death," she continued, flexing her fingers. "Makes people stop looking for what's really happening elsewhere." The monarch finally found his voice. "Guards!" She didn't react to the armored figures flooding the chamber. Just kept watching the lunar feed as troop carriers slid into frame. Black hulls. No markings. "Dying was phase 1, she said almost gently, then turned to face the throne. "Now we negotiate." But the king still thought this was his throne room. The voltage surged again. Her muscles contracted like marionette. Strings yanked taut. 4,000 microfilaments delivered pain calibrated to bypass neurological safeguards, exactly enough to make the brain believe it was dying, never enough to permit unconsciousness. "You've nailed the vibe," she gasped when her jaw unlocked. Blood speckled her teeth. Like a bad dinner party where the host won't stop talking politics. The torturer's third arm twitched. His species didn't laugh, not the way humans understood it, but something in her tone made his chitinous plates rattle, an instinctive response to social threat. Behind the one-way glass, 2 galactic envoys exchanged glances. One coughed into his ventral pouch. The sound suspiciously resembled a stifled chuckle. "Focus," the monarch snapped from his observation perch. His voice echoed through the chamber's neural feed, vibrating in the prisoner's teeth. She blinked up at the ceiling and sighed. Right. Torture Protocol 101. Her fingers traced idle patterns in the sweat puddled on the slab. "You're missing the background music, though. Some light jazz, maybe?" Pain is expected. Begging is anticipated. But jokes? The torturer hesitated mid-adjustment. His training manuals contained 17 volumes on interrogation psychology. None covered prisoners who critiqued their torment like theater critics. The neural disruptors cycled up again. Her spine arched. The monitors showed synaptic firestorms that should have reduced cognition to animal panic. "I give the ambiance a 6 out of 10, she managed when her vocal cords stopped spasming. "Points off for lacking thematic cohesion." The gallery shifted uneasily. A Verlaxian ambassador's tail tip flicked in barely suppressed amusement. Humor does something peculiar to power structures. It turns hierarchies into suggestions. When she compared the monarch's interrogation chamber to a third-rate spa, it didn't just mock his authority. It reframed the entire encounter as trivial. Beneath notice, the neural disruptors hit again. This time she laughed through the convulsions. The sound unsettled the guards, more than screams would have. Deep in the palace's West Wing, an unscheduled data burst flared through the old relay system. The tech on duty almost flagged it. Then the prisoner made another joke about the monarch's taste in decor, and the resulting commotion drowned out the alert chime. "You're wasting energy," the torturer growled, adjusting his instruments with unnecessary force. "Energy?" She lolled her head toward him. "Buddy, I once did karaoke after 3 back-to-back marathons. This is warm-up." Her pupils were blown wide, capillaries hemorrhaging in her sclera. Yet her voice remained steady, almost conversational. "Speaking of, ever tried singing during electroconvulsive therapy? Makes your vibrato weirdly metallic." The monarch's grip tightened on his scepter. Protocol demanded silent, efficient braking. Not This. His torturer hesitated before the next sequence, 3 seconds longer than standard. Not much, but enough for 17 separate subsystems to cycle into standby mode across the orbital grid. Observers later parsed the chamber footage frame by frame. They found the exact moment reality tilted. It wasn't when she joked about the voltage, settings. Not even when she critiqued the chamber's acoustics. It came when the Borzian trade delegate, a species physiologically incapable of smiling, emitted an ultrasonic pulse that their own translators interpreted as uncontrollable laughter. Enough! The monarch's voice shook the observation gallery, but the damage was done. His torturer's next adjustment lacked conviction. The instruments, sensing the hesitation, delivered only 87% of programmed intensity. She noticed. Of course, she noticed. Oof. Performance anxiety? Another convulsion racked her frame. The monitors flatlined for 11 seconds this time. When they resumed, her first words were, "So where was I?" "Right, your interior design choices. Seriously, who picks obsidian for a torture chamber? It's like you've never heard of mood lighting." 23 light-years away, a dormant receiver array stirred to life. Its activation sequence matched the pulse pattern of her suppressed laughter almost exactly. The torturer reached for the final setting. His claw hovered. "Do it," the monarch ordered. But ritual had been broken. Power, once framed as absolute, now looked like theater. Bad theater at that. Humor hadn't saved her, that wasn't the point. It had made them doubt, made them hesitate. And in those gaps, those precious widening cracks, something else slithered through. Her head lolled toward a seemingly random point on the ceiling. "Now that's what I call a punchline," she murmured. The lights flickered. Just for a second. Elsewhere, relays hummed to life. The Galactic Empire knew humans bled. Knew their bones broke under precisely 1,472 newtons of pressure. Their scientists could map every neurotransmitter that fired during agony, could recite the molecular composition of human screams condensed into plasma. But patience? That invisible current running beneath human skin? Their scanners registered it as background noise. 6 months earlier, a mining vessel had accidentally drifted into restricted space. Standard Imperial protocol dictated immediate obliteration. But the ship's emergence angle, 11.3 degrees off the ecliptic, placed it perfectly for a single garbled distress call before impact. Coordinates matched an uninhabited lunar crater. The Empire's astrocartographers verified this while eating their midday rations. No threat, no significance. Just another primitive miscalculation ending in fire. They missed the freeze frame buried in that transmission. Exactly 17 microseconds of distorted imagery, showing a woman's hands inputting codes. The same woman now strapped to their torture slab. The garbling wasn't interference, it was encryption keyed to biological markers in her bloodstream. Her left eye twitched. Not from pain, it was counting. Blinks translating to binary. The guards assumed it was neural misfiring. Their diagnostic, wands swept over her, searching for implanted tech, for weapons, for any physical threat their vast databases understood. Meanwhile, the real weapon coursed through her arteries. Engineered proteins assembling microscopic receivers in her bone marrow. The Empire's scanners pinged them as incidental calcium deposits. Still with us? The torturer sneered after another. Voltage surge. She spat out a tooth, smiled. Wouldn't miss this for the world. Every word carefully chosen. World triggered latent subroutines in the throne room's holographic projectors. Missynced with the life support system's maintenance cycle. The Monarch's advisors chuckled at what they assumed was bravado. They didn't notice their wrist comms skipping exactly 1 frame every 7 minutes. Symmetric warfare depends on patience wearing thinner than the opponent's attention. The girl's capture had required letting 3 spinal implants be removed without resistance, letting them think they'd destroyed her backup comms, letting the Empire feast on small victories, while the real trap digested them whole. Her fingernails left crescent marks in the slab, not from pain. Each movement etched conductive carbon trails into the porous stone. A blind technician later confessed he'd noticed anomalous capacitance readings. He'd logged it as faulty equipment. Procedure didn't require reporting such minor glitches. Across 17 star systems, seemingly random events unfolded. A coolant leak on battleplate Sigma 9. A corrupted data packet in the Imperial archives. A single docking clamp on orbital platform Epsilon failing to retract. Each incident logged separately. No one connected them. No one recognized the pattern. Every failure occurring precisely 7 minutes after her last recorded heartbeat. The torture chamber's humidity controls cycled on. Condensation pooled where her wrist restraints met the slab. Too little to notice. Enough to complete a circuit. The Empire had built the chamber to monitor everything from brain activity to subcutaneous temperature shifts. Yet their threat algorithms ignored water molecules. "Breaker," the Monarch ordered. His throne thrummed with anticipatory energy. She met his gaze and deliberately licked blood from her lips. The motion activated subdermal emitters in her tongue. Palace security logs would later show a 0.003% power fluctuation in the western spire at that exact moment. Well within operational parameters, ventilation systems pulled air across her sweat-streaked skin. Analyzers identified salt, urea, lactic acid, standard human stress indicators. They missed the synthetic compounds evaporating with each drop. Molecular keys shaped to match Imperial encryption algorithms the Empire hadn't changed in 3 centuries. "Please," she gasped suddenly. First tremor in her voice. The torturer leaned closer. "Please, tell me you've got better lines than this." The gallery groaned. 2 guards exchanged weary glances. Perfect. Her apparent weakening distracted them from the real shift. The wall behind her slab now pulsed slightly out of sync with the others. Its obsidian surface shimmered with condensation patterns that just happened to match the fractal encryption used by Imperial defense grids. Coincidence, surely. The Monarch's claw tapped impatiently on his scepter. Frequency, 122 beats per minute. Matched the pulsation of antique data relays beneath the palace, the ones still running original colony-era code, the ones everyone assumed were inert backups. They thought this was interrogation. Chess masters don't explain their moves to captured pawns. A vein burst in her right eye. The medical drones swooped in, blocking the torturer's view, just long enough for her to mouth 2 words against the slab. The lip reader assigned to monitor her was busy laughing at her latest joke. 2 light years away, 17 stealth ships drifting in comet trails received their activation signal, not via transmission, through the quantum-entangled particles in the blood now drying on the torture slab. The Monarch rose, savoring victory. He didn't notice his own holographic throne flicker. Just for a frame. Just long enough for Earth's coordinates to flash in its reflection. Then the holograms stuttered to life. The holograms flickered to life without warning. Earth's blue-white image swelled between the throne's jagged spires, washed out and grainy as if transmitted through layers of broken relays. A dozen Imperial advisors sneered reflexively at the primitive world displayed. Then the docking master's voice crackled through the comms. "Breaches on all western bays." Static swallowed his next words. "Ships emerging from our own defense. Grid." The girl sat up on her slab, wincing as torn muscle fibers reknit. Her right hand moved idly, fingers twitching in time with the emergency alerts now flashing across every console. She wasn't inputting commands. The chamber's security protocols would have caught that. She was conducting. "Signal origins confirmed," barked a scanning officer. His voice held the tremble of a man realizing his instruments had lied. "Transmission source is 30 degrees south. 80 west," the girl finished, picking glass shards from her forearm. "Miami Beach," though the image showed no landmarks. Just an unremarkable stretch of ocean glinting under harsh noon light. The hologram zoomed abruptly, not at her command, not at the Monarchs, revealing a single black point beneath the waves. "Told you we'd talk when I was ready." Classified Imperial protocols mandated immediate deep space jamming the moment Earth appeared on any internal feed. No one moved to enact them. The order required authentication codes that had inconceivably stopped working 14 minutes earlier. A junior comms officer swallowed hard. His console now displayed only one word where clearance prompts should be: watch. The projection wasn't Earth's location. Every Imperial cadet memorized those coordinates before weapons training. This was something worse. The image's metadata stream contained layered timestamps matching the girl's torture session down to the millisecond. Each scream, each convulsion synchronized perfectly with events unfolding across 17 star systems. A tremor shook the chamber, distant but unmistakable. The girl tilted her head as if listening to music only she could hear. Ah, that'll be Platform Theta's main reactor going offline. The hologram flickered, replaced by a tactical schematic showing 94 Imperial installations blinking from green to red. Not destroyed. Worse, marked with timers counting down from identical intervals. Impossible, the Monarch whispered. His third eye dilated, frantically scanning for deception. There was none. These were his own fleet's security feeds, hijacked, through channels that couldn't be hacked, that shouldn't even exist anymore. The girl flexed her shoulders. Funny thing about your legacy systems, she mused, watching blood droplets float toward the ceiling as artificial gravity wavered. All those fail-safes from the first expansion, beautifully engineered, also hard-coded to respond to specific biosignatures. She tapped the slab's surface where her sweat had pooled. Silly oversight, really, forgetting to update virus protocols for species you genocided centuries ago. One advisor lunged for the chamber's manual override. His fingers passed through the controls as if they were ghosts. The girl's chuckle sent ice through the gallery. Oh, please. Did you think this was about broadcasting a distress call? Each word made the hologram pulse. With every syllable, tactical updates flooded the throne room. Not as frantic alerts, but as calm, methodical debriefings. Outpost Gamma 9. Lost. Dreadnought squadrons. Sigma and Rho. Weapons dark. The transmission wasn't a signal at all. It was a mirror. The Monarch gripped his scepter hard enough to fracture chitin. His voice emerged strangled. You can't have infiltrated our entire... That insignificant world just scared your fleet, the girl corrected softly. The projection changed again, showing Earth once more, but now cross-sectioned, revealing 19 subterranean complexes humming with activity. Not military bases, archives. Turns out Xenocide leaves scraps, songs, prayer fragments, children's drawings etched on bulkheads before atmospheric incineration. Her bare feet touched the floor. You should have checked who else used those shipping lanes. Security teams rushed forward, or tried to. Their boots stuck to the flooring as the chamber's nanite cleaning systems activated at 30 times standard concentration. Another quake rocked the palace. This time the hologram helpfully zoomed out to display the source, their own orbital defense platform swinging lazily toward the capital. The lip reader was first to understand. He stopped struggling against hardening floor polymers to stare at the girl. The transmissions aren't commands, he breathed. They're updates, she confirmed. The bruising around her wrists faded as subcutaneous nanites completed their work. Real-time intel for forces that spent 6 months slipping into position every time your scanners hiccuped. Advisors clawed at their collars as ventilation systems abruptly reversed airflow, flushing the chamber with oxygen-rich air from the gardens. The girl inhaled deeply, smiling at the floral scent. Psychological warfare tip, she offered, picking her way through paralyzed guards. Works best when they still think they're winning. Earth's image dissolved into crisp white numerals. Eurotod 0107. The countdown pulsed gently. No alarms, no panic. Just inevitability measured in seconds. 37 light-years coreward, the ancient Iconian homeworld, glassed 12 centuries earlier, registered its first power surge in recorded history. Deep in its dead crust, a single transmitter activated. Its message matched the timestamp in the throne room exactly. The girl examined the blood still dripping from the slab. Broadcast isn't a signal, she murmured. It's a detonator. But the king still reached for his scepter. The scepter's emitter flared crimson, a beam capable of glassing continents narrowing to a needle's point at her sternum. She stood perfectly, still, not frozen, not defiant, observant. The energy discharge should have vaporized flesh, bone, the very air along its path. Instead, it bent. Like light through old glass, the killing beam warped around her ribs, caressed her collarbones, then arced back along its own trajectory with the precision of a master engraver. "Nice toy," she said, watching the monarch's claws tighten around the relic. "Shame you don't know how to use it." The reflected beam struck the scepter's central crystal just off-center. Not enough to shatter. Enough to make the embedded containment field stutter. Imperial archives would later confirm this shouldn't have been possible. The weapon's fail-safes included 17 layers of backscatter prevention. Every single one required the attacker's genetic markers to be logged in the Imperial database, a database that had, inexplicably, developed gaps matching the girl's biometric profile exactly 7 days prior. The throne room's air crackled, not with weapon discharge but with something subtler. The monarch's crown jewel could level cities, yet here its energy condensed into surgical filaments. They danced across the chamber, slicing not through enemies, but through structural weak points nobody had bothered to reinforce. A support beam sheared clean, then another. The ceiling groaned. Raw power roared past her shoulder. Another blast, this one wider, desperate. It clipped her hair, singeing exactly 3 strands before splashing against the wall behind her. The obsidian didn't vaporize. It melted in precise swirls, reshaping itself into sigils from a dead language. The air smelled suddenly of ozone and something earthy. Fungal. His weapon was designed to humble worlds. In her reflection, it carved poetry into bedrock. Advisors dove for cover as the throne's left spire collapsed. Not collapsed, unwound, its molecular bonds precisely targeted by backscatter harmonics. The girl stepped over falling debris. Her bare feet left perfect prints in molten stone. Funny thing about planet killers, she mused, tracking the scepter's panicked sweeps. They tend to assume bigger equals better. A ricocheting beam struck the gallery railing. Instead of exploding, the metal reshaped, flowing like liquid to form a perfect parabola pointed at the monarch's heart. Superior firepower is only superior if the enemy stands where you aim. Strategy turns even misfires into scalpels. The chamber trembled, not from the weapon's discharge but from what the beams missed. Every deflected shot found secondary targets, load-bearing walls, power couplings, the hidden veins of ancient cabling that fed the palace's life support. The girl didn't dodge. She tilted her head exactly 1.3 degrees left as another blast passed through where her brainstem should have been. The energy grounded itself in a data conduit behind her. Every hologram in the chamber flickered to life, displaying star charts no Imperial scholar recognized. Coordinates glowed with eerie familiarity. "Stop!" the monarch shrieked, jamming the scepter's activation rune repeatedly. The weapon's crystalline core pulsed erratically. Each failed discharge drained its reserves faster than charging cycles could compensate. By the 6th attempt, sparks crawled up the shaft toward his claws. He didn't notice. Rage made him sloppy, made him predictable. She caught the 7th blast, with her palm. This time the energy didn't reflect. It pooled in her hand like mercury, then seeped into her skin through capillaries that shouldn't have been able to conduct such voltages. Imperial biologists later testified this violated 12 known laws of physics. The girl just flexed her fingers, watching stolen energy crackle between them. You really should have read the manual. The scepter's glow died mid-charge. Its last spark traveled backward up the monarch's arm, making his chitinous plates rattle like dry leaves. Across the chamber, backup systems activated with dull thuds. None responded to his frantic commands. Precision matters more than power when dismantling empires. You don't need to crush the throne, just remove exactly enough load-bearing arrogance to let gravity do the rest. His next trigger pull produced only a hollow click. The girl was already turning away, attention shifting to the glowing sigils on the wall. They pulsed in time with her breathing now. Somewhere beneath their feet, the palace's auxiliary reactors cycled down with the finality of execution chamber. Switches. 13 centuries of conquest, distilled to a single lesson. Their greatest weapon only served to illuminate how thoroughly she'd studied it. Elsewhere, relays went dark. The docking master's voice cut through the throne room's chaos, like a scalpel. All primary relays offline, secondary nodes failing in sequence. The words carried no urgency, just the numb recitation of a man watching his own autopsy. Power fluctuations had cratered Imperial networks before. Never like this. Never with such surgical precision, each collapsed timed to the second like dominoes spaced by a mathematician. The girl tested her shoulder, rolling it until something clicked. 6 months ago, she mused, watching the last command hologram sputter out. A storage depot on Cygnus for reported minor coolant leaks. Her fingers traced patterns in the air, not commands, just idle motions. 3 weeks later, a data archive corrupted during routine maintenance. A shrug. Small things, the kind techs blame on aging systems. Small things add up. Especially when someone's counting. Imperial protocol logged every malfunction, no matter how minor. But the reports scattered across different departments, different clearance levels. No single analyst ever saw the full pattern. The girl had. Every glitch on her target list coincided with Imperial patrol rotations, supply shipments, personnel transfers. Each incident opened a window, sometimes literal. A jammed airlock here, a stalled elevator there, just long enough for something to slip through. Turns out we were right, she said as the capital's shield generators coughed. Their pulse flatlined for exactly 1.12 seconds. Standard diagnostics flagged it as power flux. The girl knew better. 12 layers beneath the palace, a single relay tower shut down mid-cycle, not from damage but because someone had gently altered its coolant mixture 6 months prior. The change was within operational tolerations. Barely. Legacy systems rot from the inside. The Empire knew this. Their engineers wrote papers about it, gave lectures, drafted upgrade proposals that languished in committees. Why fix what still worked? Their arrogance wasn't just pride, it was institutional blindness. They'd built an empire on the bones of older civilizations, yet never considered someone might study those bones. The shield flickered again. This time the failure propagated outward. Dock control lost thruster authority. Weapons platforms misfired panic shots into empty space. All stemming from that one relay tower's quiet surrender. She hadn't hacked their systems. That would have triggered alarms. Instead, she'd followed the Empire's own maintenance manuals to the letter, exploiting provisions laid down centuries prior. Backup routines that activated when primary sensors failed. Default protocols that kicked in during comms blackouts. Every failsafe, every contingency plan, all designed by long-dead engineers who never imagined their work being used this way. Funny thing about backups, the girl said, picking shards of obsidian from her palm. They only work if the threat plays by your rules. Far below, the capital's central data core attempted emergency reboot. Standard procedure, except the backup protocol she'd carefully altered now instructed it to prioritize corrupted files first, seeding chaos rather than containing it. The core dutifully resurrected damaged code, propagating errors faster than repair algorithms could compensate. Imperial security had focused on firewalls, on brute force attacks, on exotic infiltration methods. They'd missed the simpler truth. The backdoor wasn't a flaw. It was their own nostalgia. The unshakable belief that their systems were invulnerable because they'd always been invulnerable. The girl's so-called torture session had been the final piece. Every scream, every spasm, every drop of sweat, all carefully calculated inputs. Her body's reactions matched the precise biometric patterns needed to trigger dormant recovery protocols in the palace's ancient subsystems. The Empire's scanners registered pain. Their legacy systems read activation codes. Remember the transmission glitch at Beta 9 last month? She didn't wait for an answer. Your techs blame solar flares. A dry chuckle. Solar flares don't leave calling cards. The supposedly accidental data burst had piggybacked on Imperial emergency channels. By the time analysts noticed the anomaly, it had already blended into routine traffic. Just another ghost in the machine. No one connected it to the minor, utterly harmless, vibration irregularities suddenly plaguing docking clamps across the sector. Now those irregularities manifested fully. Magnetic seals released simultaneously at 17 key stations. Not enough to detach ships, just enough to make them list drunkenly, their weight-straining structural components already compromised by months of carefully engineered wear and tear. Panels buckled, conduits snapped. No single failure would have been catastrophic. Together they formed a chorus. The throne room's last functional display showed Earth again, not as a threat, but as a timestamp. The image dissolved into lines of code too ancient for most Imperial scholars to recognize. It was a simple message, really. The same one left in reactor coolants, data archives, docking clamps across their empire. You should have upgraded. But the king still thought this was about escape. The first figure materialized in a security blind spot older than the empire itself. A gap left when two surveillance grids overlapped imperfectly during the palace's last expansion. It went unnoticed. The second appeared near a disused service conduit, its arrival masked by the throne room's periodic energy surges. By the time the third shimmered into existence behind the crumbling western gallery, the pattern was undeniable. Humanoid shapes, in sleek infiltration suits moving with the eerie synchronicity of a single mind distributed across multiple bodies. The Empire had prepared for armies, for fleets, for the thunderous arrival of human war machines. Instead, they got shadows slipping through cracks in their own architecture, each one positioned precisely where the throne room's collapse had created fresh vulnerabilities. The girl didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need to. Her 17-minute death had been more than physiological manipulation. Each second of flatline transmitted precise coordinates through quantum-entangled particles seeded in her bone marrow months earlier. Now her team moved with the quiet efficiency of surgeons, entering an operating theater. No battle cries, no dramatic reveals, just hands flickering across control panels, fingers sliding into gaps between armored plating, tools humming as they interfaced with systems the Empire had forgotten could be accessed. Decapitation strikes require synchronization more than firepower. The newcomers didn't attack. They simply relieved Imperial personnel of duties that had already ceased to matter. A guard reached for his sidearm, only to find the girl's teammate already holding it, having removed the weapon during the chaos without him noticing. Advisors screamed orders that no longer reached functioning comms. The Monarch's last, loyal soldiers spun in panicked circles, weapons sweeping across friend and foe alike. The throne room became a trap, not for her, never for her, but for the power structures it represented. Two advisors turned on each other when their command codes produced contradictory results. A third clawed at his collar as his environmental controls inexplicably tightened. The air tasted suddenly of copper and old blood. Her team wore no insignia, carried no banners. Their suits absorbed light hungrily, making even their silhouettes difficult to track. Imperial tactical databases would later show these same figures appearing in security footage from 17 different, failed missions over the past 6 months, always at the periphery, always dismissed as system glitches or sensor ghosts, never recognized for what they were. Scouts. She watched the Monarch's eyes dart between the invaders. Reinforcements, he spat. The word was an accusation, a final grasp at understanding the rules being broken. The girl shook her head. You don't send reinforcements 6 months early. Her fingers twitched, not in command but acknowledgement. Across the chamber, a teammate mirrored the gesture while simultaneously disabling 3 shield generators with a palm-sized device. Solos don't win wars, but they do make excellent scouts. Better distractions. The Empire's analysts had obsessed over her training, her resilience, her ability to withstand torture. They'd drafted contingency plans for every escape attempt she might make. None accounted for the possibility she wasn't here to escape, that her capture hadn't been a mistake but an insertion. A teammate materialized beside the lip reader. No words passed between them. None were needed. The avian alien simply nodded and stepped aside, his wings folding in deliberate submission as the newcomer assumed his post at the data consoles. Around the chamber, similar exchanges unfolded with quiet finality. The Empire's defenders didn't surrender. They were relieved. The girl's teammates worked without urgency. They had all the time in the world now. One removed her helmet, revealing a face the throne room scanners identified as matching a deceased Imperial records clerk from Sector 9. Another casually disabled the last functioning weapons in the chamber by humming a specific sequence of notes that made their biometric locks disengage. Precision beats force when the battlefield is psychology. The newcomers didn't conquer. They simply settled into positions the Empire had spent centuries carving out for its enemies, their movements echoing ancient Imperial training manuals with eerie precision. The Monarch's own words from 6 standard months prior played on a dozen personal devices simultaneously. Humanity lacks the coordination for sustained resistance. Then the girl said the words that end empires. The throne room's last functioning display flickered between wreckage feeds before settling on her face. Not close enough to read micro-expressions, just far enough to emphasize the blood drying along her jawline. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Every surviving comm channel in the sector automatically amplified her words, filtering out groans of collapsing architecture, screams of panicked advisors, the wet slap of the Monarch's third eye rupturing from stress. I want your Empire to remember this moment. Not a demand, not a threat. A simple statement of fact, delivered with the weariness of someone confirming dinner plans. The words propagated through 14,000 ships, 43 occupied worlds, every listening post and observation hub within a 100 light-year radius. Some heard defiance, others heard judgment. The dozen species the Empire had driven to extinction heard something else entirely. Final speeches from broken enemies usually reek of desperation, pleas for mercy wrapped in shaky justifications. Hers contained neither. The last monarch of the Jarhun coalescence had begged for his brood queen's lives before execution. The Vektari resistance leader famously quoted poetry as orbital strikes rained down. This speech consisted of 7 words. We don't start wars. A pause just long enough for the remaining war council to realize their personal shields had deactivated. But we finish them. Relays detonated in perfect sequence. Not explosions, but controlled collapses resembling buildings demolished by expert charges. Each failure propagated the signal faster. The Empire's last dreadnought received the transmission via 3 separate backup channels before its captain understood what flickering lights in the engine core meant. Psychological warfare achieves maximum impact when the target still believes they control the narrative. She didn't gloat over the burning capital or the panicked fleet dispatches. Didn't need to. Facts spoke louder. An unprotected human woman standing amidst the wreckage of the galaxy's most secure chamber. Dust settling on her shoulders, like snow. The throne's shattered remnants formed a jagged crown behind her. Observers recorded everything. Not because she allowed it, because she engineered it. 14 stealth ships hovering in the system's Ort cloud redirected their sensors toward the throne room at precisely the right moment. Imperial comm officers later realized their emergency broadcast protocols had activated without authorization. Not hacked, but triggered by fail-safes older than the Empire itself. The same backups that once preserved Imperial edicts now disseminated their collapse. She stepped over the Monarch's scepter without glancing down. The weapon's cracked core pulsed weakly, projecting garbled holograms no one left alive could interpret. Victory wasn't captured territory or piles of enemy dead. Those achievements fade. The Empire would have understood a conventional counterattack, could have processed losing through familiar military paradigms. What unfolded instead bypassed their comprehension entirely. What terrorizes empires isn't defeat. It's realizing their existence relied on rules no one else followed. That their power stemmed from collective belief in its permanence. She didn't destroy their fleets or annihilate their worlds. Just exposed the lie at the Empire's core. That dominance equals invincibility. The relays kept failing, not randomly. Each collapse followed ancient trade routes, hopping from system to system like a virus exploiting kinship ties between ships. A Borsian freighter received final confirmation their homeworld had fallen, not from official channels, but because its automated systems recognized a specific encryption pattern in the debris field around the throne planet. She never raised a weapon, never issued ultimatums, just stood quietly as the Empire's own infrastructure dismantled itself around her. When the last advisor lunged, she sidestepped without looking. His skull met the floor with the crisp finality of a gavel stroke. They'd expected bombs, expected fleets, expected the thunderous arrival of humanity's wrath. Instead, she gave them silence where there should have been screaming, order where there should have been chaos. The absence became louder than any battle cry. Some victories don't need banners. The galaxy would remember this one by what didn't happen afterward. No occupation, no reprisals, no triumphant parades. Just 17 minutes of dead air on every Imperial frequency, followed by a single sentence echoing across the void in 37 native tongues. Try again when you've learned. Then the relays went dark for good. But the king still thought. This was about escape. Her fingers brushed dust from her sleeve, a casual motion that sent microphones straining forward. Never let the bullies think they've won. The words barely carried past her lips. Yet every surviving comm system in 17 systems amplified them like sacred text. Simple messages stick. The Empire's propaganda division had spent centuries perfecting fear campaigns, intricate mythologies of invincibility. Their downfall came wrapped in 8 syllables a child could understand. The phrase spread through collapsing battle groups like a virus. Borsian shock troops, genetically bred for absolute loyalty, hesitated mid-charge when the words pinged across their neural feeds. A dreadnought's engine crew shut down reactors after hearing it whispered through ventilation shafts. Simple. Ideas cut deeper than complex threats when morale's already cracked. She stepped over shattered holoprojectors. Their flickering corpses still showed Earth's image at odd intervals. Not triumphant, just present. The message wasn't, "We defeated you." It was, "We outlasted you." Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't hidden warships or superweapons. It was patience wearing thinner than their enemies' attention spans. Grandma's advice had outmaneuvered fleets because it bypassed military strategy entirely. The Empire spent lifetimes studying human combat tactics. Nobody analyzed our bedtime stories. A Verlaxian comm officer repeated the phrase to himself, in 17 languages, searching for hidden codes. He found only the obvious truth. Words meant exactly what they said. His resignation notice pinged Central Command 3 seconds later. Psychological demolition works best when the wrecking ball looks familiar. Nursery rhymes camouflage wartime postures beautifully. Sticks and stones makes excellent cover for orbital strike protocols. Early to bed nicely justifies pre-dawn infiltration schedules. The Empire's linguists had dissected human speeches. For centuries, they'd archived peace treaties and war declarations. Yet not one analyst had thought to study playground taunts. Imperial records would later show 73% of defecting personnel cited the bully phrase as their breaking point. Not the collapsing infrastructure, not the lost battles. Just those 8 words exposing their entire civilization as schoolyard thugs who'd never faced consequences. She didn't watch the holograms flare and die. Didn't need to. Every flicker showed the same calculation being made across the galaxy. Continuing this fight meant admitting the bully hadn't won yet. Better to surrender than confirm she'd been right. Complex encryption schemes had failed to penetrate Imperial networks for centuries. Yet, "stop hitting yourself" translated perfectly across species lines when accompanied by their own weapons malfunctioning. The girl paused at the throne room's broken doors. Behind her, the last projector displayed Earth one final time, not as a threat but as a receipt. No armies, no smoking ruins. Just an ordinary world that had waited very patiently for its message to be understood. Primitive civilizations don't remain primitive for long, especially not when their enemies provide such comprehensive tutorials in their own weaknesses. Simple lessons scale. The same advice that works on playground blacktops functions equally well across interstellar empires, provided you wait for the right moment to share it. Her team fell into step behind her without words. No triumphant poses. No celebratory gestures. Just quiet professionals exiting a completed job site. The throne room's doors, once requiring genetic authorization from 12 separate royals to open, slid shut at her passage with obedient finality. Some weapons don't need maintenance. Don't start fights, but finish them, remains razor-sharp across millennia. The Empire's mistake wasn't underestimating human technology. It was failing to recognize that every grandmother's warning to her grandchildren was also, inevitably, a battle plan. Then the relays activated. The Empire doesn't end with thunder or fire, but with a whisper in the dark. I was betting on 20. The relays die quietly. The last dreadnoughts power down without ceremony. Some losses don't need explosions, just the slow realization that you've been outplayed since minute 1. Underestimation is the deadliest miscalculation. They measured human strength in fleets, in weapons, in visible threats. Never considered that patience could be tactical. That mockery could dismantle regimes. Across the black, silent watchers recalibrate their assessments. The girl walks away from the wreckage, without looking back. Humanity isn't small, it's precise. And precision scales infinitely.